Welcome to Wellness with John, resources to help you thrive. I'm John Peters, and this is episode 4 of a 7-part series I'm doing on acceptance and commitment therapy. I'm going to talk about mindfulness today, but if you haven't watched the first episodes, I'll put a link up here. You can go back and start with episode 1. So today we're going to talk about mindfulness. Stay tuned. Okay, in this episode, I want to talk about mindfulness. And if you've watched other videos on my channel, you know that I am an enthusiastic proponent of the practice of mindfulness because it's easy to do and it confers so many valuable benefits. Feel free to check out other content on this channel for more information about that. But in today's video, I want to talk about mindfulness practice in the context of doing acceptance and commitment therapy, okay? Because mindfulness is very essential to being able to do the other elements of ACT, just like with DBT, with dialectical behavioral therapy. Mindfulness is a core component, and it's actually the thing that makes the other components actually work, okay? And this is true of a lot of forms of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. But if you've watched the previous videos, you understand that in ACT, we are trying to deal with things in a mode of acceptance, which basically means not in a mode of avoidance, so that we are actually proactively focusing on and assertively and optimally working with the things that we want to deal with in our life. And so that is this mode of acceptance as opposed to avoidance. And acceptance, I discussed, it has some richness to it once we get into what acceptance can be. And so we also, in order to be in a mode of acceptance and to work with things optimally, need to often use the strategy of cognitive diffusion, which I talked about as well. So mindfulness pertains to this because mindfulness is about practicing acceptance with your ongoing experience, because we define mindfulness as present-centered awareness of your ongoing experience in a non-judgmental way. The non-judgmental part means less fusion, so more diffusion. And it also means staying stable and not getting battered around by the turbulence of the experience or the magnitude or what we call the valence, whether it's miserable or maybe even pleasurable, seducing us into it. But we're staying stable while being aware of an experience in a somewhat more neutral state, but not like a totally passive, apathetic state where we're unaffected and not reactive to what we're experiencing. We're tuned in, we're present, right? Not checked out, but we're not getting battered around too much by it. So mindfulness is the practice of being in that mental state, okay? So mindfulness is a term that we often use to talk about the quality of the state of mind, right? If I'm mindful and you and I are having a conversation, you're going to have a sense that I'm present, I'm listening to you, I'm responding meaningfully to what you're talking about. If I'm not present, I'm checked out. I'm like on my phone, or I'm distracted, or I'm just blah, I don't seem to care about what you're saying, right? You can see that quality in someone else, right? We can see that quality in ourselves. So mindfulness is about being present with ongoing experience. And in the context of ACT, it is helpful because it promotes being in that state of acceptance with the attitude of acceptance, not being in avoidance and remaining stable, even while dealing with what might be triggering and challenging parts of our experience and things that produce fear or that we are confused about, right? And then we need to have some strength and resolve, to bring the positive qualities to bear on the problem that you're trying to change, right? So mindfulness is a term about the state of mind of being mindful, okay? But mindfulness also refers to practices. So when I say we incorporate mindfulness into ACT, it's not only that we want to promote being mindful, but we want to teach people how to practice being mindful in order to be mindful. But more importantly than that, even, is when you do certain mindfulness practices, what happens is your brain responds by actually rewiring itself so that you increase the capacity to be in that state. Okay? Because it's one thing to develop knowledge and skill and to be shepherded, let's say, by your therapist to be in a mode that's conducive to your mental health. But there's another element that has to do with being able to do it well and to good ends, and that is capacity or fitness. Okay? Think of this as analogous to me deciding that I'm going to go compete in a marathon. Okay? I could have knowledge of, okay, there is a marathon. I could read a book about running marathons. Okay, so I have some knowledge. And I could even figure out, okay, how am I going to run and develop the skill of my stride or whatever, like I know how to run. So I have the skill. So I have knowledge and skill. If I don't develop increased capacity at that point, okay, I have knowledge and skill, but I may not have a lot of capacity to actually do it, then I'm just going to show up at the marathon and I get what I get, right? And with my current fitness level, and maybe I'm not going to compete and get a good time, right? But if I actually want to perform well, okay, so I want to get a competitive time at the marathon, then I need the knowledge and skill, but then I need the practice in order to improve my capacity, improve my physical fitness, so that when I show up at the marathon, I'm actually going to be able to perform optimally, okay? Mental states are dependent on our brain, right? Our brain is a physical organ and it has lots of complex parts and it does some marvelously complex things, but that is mediated by physical structures in the brain. And our brain has what's called neuroplasticity, which means our brain changes in response to experience. So our brain adds or takes away neurons. Our brain adds and takes away receptors based on what we're experiencing, and it physically changes the brain, right? You may have watched videos on people promoting taking dopamine breaks. If you haven't, watch those because they're really good. But why do those work? Because they actually change your brain. They change the dopamine, how dopamine is working in your brain, because your brain changes dopamine receptors. Okay, we'll come back to that later in another video, maybe. But in any case, our brain changes in response to what we do with our brain. Therefore, there's certain things that we can do with our brain that can cause beneficial changes that relate to what we're doing when we're doing ACT. And they also cause generalized beneficial changes so that you get brain fitness that are valuable even beyond whatever goals you might have brought to the beginning of your therapeutic process. For example, when people practice even a little bit of mindfulness regularly, daily, within 1 to 2 weeks, people tend to start to report that their baseline stress levels lower, their triggers, when they get trigger spikes to stressors, they don't spike up as high. When they do spike up as high, they resolve back down more quickly rather than staying spiked up and trailing off more slowly. They also tend to report that they're just generally more happy and that they're sleeping better. So why are those things happening? And why are they happening even when they're not actively practicing mindfulness? Because the practice of the mindfulness is causing brain changes, and those brain changes are causing those beneficial effects. Okay, so just like me training for a marathon, getting more fit, if I do mindfulness in the right way, my brain is going to be more fit when it has to perform in real life and dealing with stressors. Okay. So I want to throw out a technique that helps you get a taste of how to practice mindfulness, because a lot of what we experience in our days and the habitual mental states that we're in are not particularly mindful. And so when we are mindful and in a more mindful state, then that can help us see the contrast in order to then work with it more effectively. So here's one technique that's called 333. Okay. So in this technique, what you're going to do is you're going to first pay attention to 3 things you see and slowly and deliberately say to yourself each of those things, right? So if I did that right now, I would say camera, wall, tripod. Okay, slowly, deliberately naming 3 things in my visual field. Then I'm going to name 3 things I hear. I hear a car running down the street. I hear birds singing. I can hear the hum of one of my computers in the room. Okay? So just in turn, naming 3 things that I can hear. Then I name 3 things I can feel. I feel my butt against the chair that I'm sitting in. I feel my feet against the floor in front of me. Okay? I can feel my back against the chair I'm sitting in. Okay? So 333 is a way to come into the present moment, and it's easy because those things are simple and relatively neutral in tone. Okay? Obviously, when we are being mindful of our life, not everything is really simple, not everything is neutral in tone, and yet we can be mindful even of things that are complex, and even things that have stronger what we call emotional valence, so things that are more highly pleasurable or more highly miserable than just seeing a wall, right? So, but this is important. And the interesting thing is when we are mindful, like in the 333 exercise, of things that are simple and neutral in tone, it's still using the same parts of our brain that we use when we are needing to be optimally mindful of something that is complex and perhaps triggering. Okay, same parts of the brain, and that's why the practice of mindfulness is so important. Because if, as your therapist, I'm saying, "Hey, I'm going to support you in taking a look at and being mindful of this stuff in your life that you're finding challenging and that you want to work with constructively and that you might want to change in certain ways and goals that you want to achieve." If I'm helping you with that, I can give you guidance on how to practice. I can give you knowledge about it. I can teach you the skills of how to do that. But this important part is often left off of ACT. It's left out of a lot of forms of therapy. And that is, I want to teach you how you can increase your capacity so you actually perform better when you are applying that knowledge and skill. And when I maybe shepherd you through a certain type of therapeutic experience, right? If we leave off that one last bit, it's like teaching people, hey, everybody, you'll go perform well at a marathon just by reading this book about marathons. No. So many things in life, including things we do with our brain, are dependent on capacity and fitness and not just knowledge and skill. And so mindfulness is a very important part of ACT. Again, not only because it helps support being in a mode of acceptance, it helps teach people how to be in the mode of acceptance in a robust way that helps with the therapeutic goals, and it helps with just living life in a more satisfying way in general. But it also helps people learn how to do things that are going to change the brain and give you brain fitness so that you not only get better performance in what you're doing in your ACT process, but you actually get better performance in life, right? When I teach people this type of thing, and I have taught 10,000 people mindfulness techniques at this point in my career, I hear back that practicing mindfulness helps them with their emotional regulation. They're not as angry as much of the time. They're dealing with it more effectively. I have people practice even a short bit of mindfulness for just days and come back and tell me, hey, my partner actually noticed that I'm less stressed out and things like that. So real effects, unambiguous effects that you can notice when you practice. If you want to learn a little bit about how to practice mindful breathing, I'll put a link up here now because I made a video on that not too long ago, and that's an easy way to learn how to practice the type of mindfulness that can help you change your brain. But I will tell you that I have another resource that's free that will teach you these techniques as well to help you get more brain fitness and help you lower your stress and lower your anxiety. I've got a free ebook that I give out. So it's just courses.johnpeters.online/free stress ebook. I'll put the link down in the description. But it's a free ebook that has 7 lessons to teach you these types of practices that are very easy to learn, very easy to practice, don't take a lot of time. And in a relatively short bit of practice, you're going to notice those unambiguous positive results. So highly recommend that you get a copy of that ebook and experiment with those practices in order to get those benefits. So if you like this kind of content, feel very free to hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel to support me and to help YouTube learn who to show these videos to. Feel free to comment below because I love getting feedback about the content. It helps me craft the type of content that people on this channel want to see. And if you have a friend who might benefit from one of my videos, feel very free to share or post to your social media. I very much appreciate your support. And I will see you in episode 5.